Memory and learning are inextricably connected to one another, sometimes in a subtle manner, but oftentimes in a self evident way. In common parlance, to say I learned how to speak Spanish, for example, presupposes that I remember enough Spanish words and the underlying structure of the language to speak it fluently. When we learn, changes occur in our nervous system. If these changes are robust and long term, they are referred to as memories. Neural structures involved in learning and memory are widespread and include sensory, cortical, and subcortical areas. What are these structures and what are the processes involved? And how do they interact to produce memory? In order to learn, and hence remember, we first must encounter novel stimuli. This information then makes its way into our nervous system via our senses and is mediated by our perception. The raw external stimuli are translated into neural information via the sensory systems and is encoded into our brain. The process of encoding is facilitated by our sensory memory. There are a multitude of brain areas associated with this step of the process that correspond to the encountered stimuli. Visual information makes its way into our brains via our eyes and our visual cortex. Motor information acts through the somatosensory, motor, and supplementary motor cortexes. Sound information comes through the auditory cortex. All of these areas associated with perceiving external stimuli then converge into deeper subcortical brain areas. Let's have a look at some of the important subcortical areas that are related to memory. Since we do not yet have full knowledge of memory and its mechanisms, it's useful to note how memory is affected when areas of the brain are damaged. This is done by examination of the brains of amnesiac patients, primarily. The most frequently cited area that is damaged and results in memory loss is the hippocampus, which is located in the temporal lobes. People with amnesia usually have temporal memory loss. This means that they either can remember events that occurred before their brain damage, or they can only remember events that occurred after their brain damage. This suggests that the hippocampus is not a storehouse of memories, but rather that it facilitates the consolidation of memories. And as we learned in Chapter 9, it appears that this process of consolidating memories occurs while we sleep. Another important neural structure to consider are the transcortical pathways that connect the sensory association cortex, motor association cortex, basal ganglia, and the thalamus. When we begin to learn something, it takes a lot of effort and attention. As time and practice continue, our task gets easier and we eventually can perform it without much attention. The basal ganglia allows us to do this. At first, new pathways are established that enable us to engage in the new behavior. The basal ganglia watch our behavior and which connections are active to cause it. Eventually, once the basal ganglia map out these pathways, it takes onto itself the role of carrying out these behaviors and frees up our attention to focus on other tasks. A neurotransmitter that facilitates learning is dopamine. Dopamine acts as a reinforcer and encourages memory production. When we behave in a way that rewards us with natural reinforcers, we receive a dopamine kick that strengthens the circuits used to perform that behavior. How is communication mediated on a neurological level? Language comprehension and production is lateralized in the brain. This means that some areas associated with language are only found in one hemisphere of the brain. Most language areas are found in the left hemisphere of the brain. There are some that are found in the right hemisphere, and they appear to be responsible for visuospatial information, narrative organization, and the expression and recognition of emotion in the voice. Broca's area, which is located in the left frontal lobe, facilitates speech production. Patients with damage to this area find it difficult to speak. Sometimes patients are unable to find the proper word and often require more time than usual to bring the word to mind. Additionally, patients mispronounce words and find great difficulty with articulation. Broca's area is home to implicit motor memories that enable speech. It also appears to store grammatical information about language, and patients with damage to it do not speak in a grammatically correct way. People with damage to Broca's area are able to comprehend what is spoken to them better than they are able to express what it is that they want to say. The other important area for speech is Wernicke's area, which is located in the left temporal gyrus. It is responsible for the understanding of language. Without being able to understand language, all one perceives when one is speaking is unintelligible vocal utterances. Logically enough, if Wernicke's area is damaged, it's also impossible to produce speech that is understandable. Damage to this area does not affect speech production per se, but it does result in speech that makes little to no sense to the hearer. When one with damage to Wernicke's area speaks, they appear to have proper grammatical structure and speech melody, though the content makes no sense.